Um, yeah, so let's just start. So we've got Janet here with us today as our guest, which we're excited about. Some of you may remember her from Twitter as Catlady. So we're really happy to chat with you today, Janet. We have had a lot of people asking a little bit about why you were banned from Twitter. I wonder if that's a question that you can answer, since people are curious and
I
concerned.
mean, I can answer it as best as I can. So during the initial part of the WeSpa debacle, all of a sudden I got a notification that looked really weird to me. I can't explain how it seemed off. And then, but basically, within that notification, it wasn't a quote tweet, but it was a quote from our former president. It was a rather racist quote about Mexicans, and I understood potentially why somebody was sending that to me, because I think they were kind of trying to do the whole, well, you're tarring and feathering all trans women because of something one has done, and then somehow later that night, I got a notification from Twitter with an image as if I had sent that tweet. And I'm going, but I didn't. That tweet did not come from me. And, and it just said, my account has been suspended. It wasn't a, delete this tweet and, you can wait 12 hours. It was just, your account is suspended. And I can still access my account. I can still see all of my history unless I actually click on something. And I mean, that tweet does not exist. It's not there. It didn't come from me. And I've appealed. Unfortunately, with Twitter, all you can do is wait. They will take their sweet time. You have no ability, as far as I've been told, to actually speak to a real human person. So it's been a little over a month now, I guess, that I have been off Twitter. And whoever decided that they thought that would be a way to silence me kind of made the wrong choice, because it pissed me off and made me want to talk more. And so that's why I started my YouTube channel back up. I try to post periodically. A lot of times it's more of just something will come to me that I feel I have to get out, because I don't have that outlet now that Twitter was giving me to kind of vent my frustration at where we are now.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I'm doing videos, talking to you guys, hoping to start doing a little bit more. So yeah, I'm off Twitter for the moment, but I'm not being quiet. And I do appreciate everyone that is kind of keeping the torch alive out there in Twitter land for me. Whenever I post a video, people forward it on. Because I'm still able to go into Twitter somewhat, I can at least see when people are talking about me, so that I do see the messages from people wondering where I am and wondering if I'm okay. I am. I hope that I can eventually get back to Twitter, but it's just a waiting game.
It's funny what you said about obviously that blocking or that banning or suspension that you got kind of made you angry and wanted you to speak up more. That's actually how I first got invested in this. Is Ariel Scarcella had made a post saying, please submit your controversial LGBT feelings. And I said that the T didn't belong because it's a mental disorder and not a sexual orientation. This was 2 years ago. And I got suspended for that. And I was like, what the hell? So now I'm talking about nothing else.
Yeah.
It's how our brains work.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really funny, because for the most part, I mean, I could just walk away and the trans part of my life wouldn't have much impact on my day-to-day life. But what bothers me is too few of us are speaking out on this side of the topic. Especially, I'm not seeing a lot of trans women. And like when the We Spa thing hit, I was seeing posts and I was seeing even videos from gender critical people saying, where are the trans people talking about this? Where are the ones that are, saying that, this shouldn't happen? Having male genitals in a female space is wrong. And literally all I was coming across were, trans women that were doing videos about, well, that poor trans woman, how awful she must feel that she's under such scrutiny. It's like, no, I feel bad for, any women that were there that, were all of a sudden presented with an unexpected penis. I mean, no, that's where my sympathy is, that they didn't enter a space expecting to see that. And so, yeah, that's kind of where, why I said, no, I've got to, I've got to be a voice out there. Somebody's got to be talking, even if it's, even if it's just a few.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I think I've seen other people post about this. Like we don't tend to hear stories of trans men, who haven't yet had bottom surgery, getting naked in men's change rooms or men's washrooms. I mean, that doesn't tend to happen. If it is, it certainly isn't being reported. But the reason I think why that wouldn't happen, I mean, I know that I wouldn't feel safe doing that.
Exactly.
So so what is that about, right? So what is it about that I wouldn't feel safe doing that, but certain trans women feel safe exposing themselves in female washrooms? Well, that's about safety, right? Because why? Because biological males, we know, are more aggressive, less safe on average than women are on average, right? So
right. And it's, and Aaron, I mentioned this to you. I have this theory that I have, kind of dubbed the deploy trans man defense shield. And I see so many trans people, especially trans women, but I'm seeing a lot of trans men deploy it themselves. And it's, basically the idea that, well, if you insist that trans women must be in men's spaces, then trans men have to be in women's spaces. And then they'll post a picture of, say, Buck Angel and say, do you want him in your, in your space? And it's like, but then you're also going to criticize Buck for, being a transsexual and, not, and say that you don't have to transition, to be a trans man, but yet you're clearly using the image of somebody that has transitioned to appear male. And also you're just ignoring the fact that there is realistic differences because of our physical bodies that, you're a trans woman that has not physically transitioned, and even one that has, it's not really going to have the same safety concern entering a women's space as a trans man will entering a men's space, I imagine. My understanding and my expectation is that, especially for a lot of trans men, they're not using men's spaces, either one, if they have an option of a third space or a single occupancy space. A lot of them are choosing that instead. And if not, they're very conscious of how well they pass in that space. Because if they don't pass, the safety issue is so much greater for them, not so much for the other men in that space. It's the idea of being a female in a male space that puts them at risk. Whereas trans women, on average, we're going to be bigger, stronger, not really at risk from the women in a woman's space. And I've had that comment so many times, like talking about prison. If you want trans women to be in women's prison, then in men's prisons, then you want trans men to be in women's prisons. And I'm like, yeah, for the most part, I want trans men in women's prisons, because most of them would be, up a creek without a paddle in a men's prison, because it's our bodies that, if anything, puts us at risk, not, not this idea of, a gender in our head.
Yeah, and I mean, take the trans issue out of the conversation entirely, and just think about, the biological realities between, male and female. There was a reason why things like bathrooms and sports were segregated in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, of course, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. That, of course, there are some men that are smaller and less physically strong than some biological females out there. But on average, men tend to be bigger, stronger, faster than women, and tend to commit violent crime more often or sexualized crime more often than women. So, I mean, that was just common sense before the trans issue came into that picture, right? That was just common sense, that we need to segregate certain spaces for safety reasons and for safety reasons. And our identities or our gender dysphoria don't change that reality, right? That it doesn't change that biological reality. So I think we're all on the same page that, we respect, that some people have dysphoria, some people are trans, and I don't want trans people to be unsafe either. But we can't just ignore these common sense realities, right? So we have to be able to problem solve and find nuanced solutions to these things.
And I think that's part of the problem, is the idea of nuance has gone completely out the window. The idea now of having third spaces is seen as transphobic. It's like, no, I'm sorry, no one is going to pay enough attention to me that if I go into a single occupancy restroom, they're going to go, oh, she went in there because she's trans. No, I've been to places where the single occupancy restroom has a line for it because people want the privacy of being in a single occupancy restroom as opposed to being in the general restroom with everyone else. And certainly not all those people are trans. It's gotten to the point where it's everything now. You have to be included in everything under every circumstance as what your gender says you are, whether you've transitioned or not. And it's like, that makes no sense. I mean, I could really, I could legitimately argue that, being a post-op transsexual, there are situations where it is probably better for me to be in a women's space or, than a man's space. I try now not to really make those arguments because I think women deserve a space that is technically single sex. But, I could at least make a legitimate argument about, if you put, if I go to the beach and I go into the men's locker room and change in there, I'm technically exposing, whatever children are in there to what appears to everyone else a female body, whether it really is or not. That's what they're seeing. That would be, just as inappropriate.
Oh, but stuff like that happens. Like I as a long haul trucker, I traveled in the United States, and down there, if the lineup in the women's bathroom is long, women think nothing of using the men's room. Like,
Yeah.
I've gone into duty-free shops where a tour, whatever, a gender-segregated tour came in, so there's like 50 women, and they all need to go to the bathroom, and suddenly I'm in a lineup for the men's bathroom with 5 or 10 women in front of me.
And to be honest, I'm surprised that there's never as much talk from men about that, because as ridiculous as the bathroom issue becomes at some point on a trans level, I mean, the men's bathroom, even though I haven't been in one for a few years now, they at least do have, open areas where technically you do see things, and it's like, I would be much more upset as a man, utilizing that space and seeing, a woman walk in, while I was at a urinal. Not that I can use one, but, I'm always kind of surprised. And I think it does kind of come down to this odd idea of, it's the safety and also just like some moral propriety type thing. And as much as I think that it's important that women have that, I think it's sad that, we kind of don't allow men to have the same thing. It's like, why, yes, there's a safety issue existent for women, but there's also just as much of a privacy issue for men, but we just kind of throw our hands up and kind of go, well, no big deal for them.
Yeah, it's hard to know, and speculate what's on other people's minds, but I mean, let's just hazard a guess, like what might be the barrier for members of our community to be able to just have this conversation and problem solve some of these nuances. What do you think your best guess would be as to why our community is sort of taking this stance and isn't willing to kind of budge and problem solve and admit, well, we do have biological reality as trans people, that our identities don't, or our choices to transition doesn't change. So I've tried talking to guys on forums about this kind of thing, right? Like, and trying to be as gentle as possible about it, saying, well, what do you guys think about, incarcerated women being abused, now that more and more trans women are being transferred into female prisons? What do you think about that? Like, why is that okay for women to be assaulted, in these vulnerable spaces? And rather disheartened to by the response to that, right? That have been booted off these forums and stuff, rather than people being willing to engage in debate about that. And my impression when I've done that isn't that they're just uncaring jerks. I mean, my impression from the responses was that they don't actually believe that's happening. Right? There's this cognitive block for them that they just think, no, that's not happening. And by you bringing it up, you're basically lying to us, and therefore you have some sort of malicious intent.
Yeah, it's. I think you've got a couple different things. I think you've got a whole new generation of trans people, and I say generation as generation as in the time frame in which they transition, not so much their actual physical age, that have come into being trans under this, trans ideology of identity being everything. And I think that's part of it. I think part of it is, they get so accustomed to this idea that everyone else is misrepresenting, or you're making too much out of one or two things, that there are going to be bad people, so what? And it's like, okay, but if there are so few trans people, which statistically there really are, but yet we say, well, trans people are statistically significant enough to, warrant all these things, all these changes in policies, all these things that we want. Why is that a significant statistic, but the people that are being impacted negatively are not? Why are trans women in prison more important than the women in prison that are being assaulted by people who are trans? And so, it's like you can't have it both ways. You can't have a small minority being very important and also a small minority being so unimportant we don't address it or say that it doesn't exist.
You're right. It's kind of a numbers game, hey? Yeah, it's an interesting numbers game, because you're right that on one hand we want people to care about us even though we're a minority, but if you bring up prisons issue or bathroom issue or detransitioners issue, it's always like, well, no, it's such a small percentage that why should we care about that? And it's like, yeah, but they're real people. I mean, a single woman being raped or assaulted in prison is something that we should care about and think about how do we problem solve and keep people safe, or if it's true, it's like, I don't know what the percentage they're saying now about detransition, if that's true, that 2% or 5% or whatever is it has regret. Well, why can't we still care about that and problem solve and try to show interest in their experience so we can better understand how can we better serve everybody that seeks out care.
And I think part of the problem is because I know I fell into this, because I try very hard now to be open about the fact that for a few years when I first transitioned, I was much more on the trans rights advocate side. But I think when we as individuals think about some of these issues, we internalize them as how we would react in those situations, or what we would do. And even if we know other trans people, we think about Sally wouldn't do this, and John wouldn't do this, and whatnot. And so I used to always say no trans woman would ever expose her genitals in a female space because it would be so dysphoric that why would how could you possibly do that? That's like the key thing that would prove that you don't belong there. And then I go on Twitter and I see a bunch of trans people, including trans celebrities, that basically said, I have every right to do that. And it's like, okay, I can't say that anymore. Just because I wouldn't, or the people that I know personally wouldn't, that doesn't mean that there aren't trans people that will. I can't use that argument because you've just proven me wrong.
Mm-hmm. It's somehow shifted so that our identities are basically all that we are, and our bodies are entirely irrelevant So whatever shell you happen to be in is irrelevant to what bathroom you access and what you do with your body in there. It's all about your internal sense of identity. That's how they're approaching it. That's the mentality that leads one to a place where it's totally fine to expose a penis in a woman's changing space because that penis belongs to a woman. So why wouldn't that be fine? Is what they're thinking. It's madness.
And I also I'm so afraid that this whole disassociation from our physical bodies is also playing a factor in medical transition. You know, if we are so detached from our bodies that, you know, we're not really caring or paying attention to the impact that something that's very, very serious will have on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are making, you know, you're not really necessarily making the best choices.
Yeah, it's such a disembodied way of looking at things, isn't it? I mean, to your point, Aaron, that it's, you know, identity is all that matters, and our biology isn't what matters. And I don't know how we kind of get back, because that's new. Like I don't remember that being the theme as to the same degree that it is now. I don't remember that as much like 20 years ago or whatever. Like it. I don't know how we get back to this place that we're trans and that should be okay. You know, we should still have rights and safety. But I don't see how it benefits us as people, as trans people, either, to have this very disembodied existence where, you know, a trans woman is a woman in every way, and a trans man is a man in every way, and that we don't have very real biological differences. I mean, that I don't know exactly how to articulate this, but I mean that has implications for our well-being as well, not just the societal problems that are the result of that, but to not acknowledge our own physicality in a realistic way. What does that mean for our health choices down the road, or, you know, or just our relationship with our body, and how we're thinking through our own process of how do I fit in the world in a way that's respectful of other people and other people's rights, so that I can coexist with people in a way that they trust us, right? Because our activism has, well, two things. I mean, the disembodiment, and I don't see how that benefits me to have a disembodied existence, because I'm older now, as you all are. I'm older. I'm having health problems now because I'm older, and because of testosterone. And so I'm having to think through these things in terms of my biological reality. And I've said this a few times now, like if I were to have a heart attack because of my high cholesterol, am I going to have female warning signs or male warning signs? Like those questions become more a part of my reality now that my body itself is starting to experience aging. And so that, I mean, that's one side of it. And I don't know, maybe I'll just leave it at that point and see what you all think. I was about to go off on another tangent, but
I'll just kind of going back to the whole difference between our bodies and our identities, and that them wanting to kind of separate the two. It's interesting how they're able to use that as one, basically saying that therefore whatever space you use is independent of your actual physical body. So that doesn't matter. You're a man whether, you know, you are physically one or not, a woman same way. But yet somehow altering your body in the direction of the sex you identify as is life-saving and medically necessary intervention. Obviously, you know, this is a gender critical argument that's made all the time. It was just brought back to my mind, but it's so contradictory.
Well, I mean, trans ideology by and large is full of contradictions.
Yeah.
And that is one of them. And I mean, I look at it and go, okay, so on the one hand, you don't have to do anything at all to be trans. But on the other hand, children must transition as soon as humanly possible, or they will kill themselves. You can't have it both ways. You know, it really, again, it comes down to that contradiction. And it, one of the things that I really hope that people start, questioning and looking at is, where are these narratives coming from and who are they benefiting? Because I don't think they are benefiting the children that have dysphoria. I don't think they're benefiting really a lot of people that are identifying as trans right now. And I actually think that, I think you've got a lot of narratives that are doing a lot of harm. One of the things that I see, I don't comment on Reddit, but I go on and look at, some of the Reddit subforums, and I see so many posts from people, particularly, male to female, that, they're in their like early 20s or even like 19, and they're like, well, my life is screwed because I didn't get on puberty blockers. And it's like, you're 19. There's plenty of us that, transition much later than that and live perfectly happy lives. This idea that you have to do it as early as possible in order to have a successful outcome is hurting a lot of people. And I used to support at least blockers. I used to support at least blockers, and I'm to the point now I don't support even social transition for anyone at least under 16, even socially, because I think it cements this idea in people's heads that this is what I am. I get called out because I didn't transition until I was 39, but I was diagnosed at 16. I had, well, we called it gender identity disorder back then. When I was, 5, 8 was when I first learned about transsexuals. But, my parents, even though I had been diagnosed, were basically like, we're not, we understand that you feel this way, but we're not going, to do anything about it. You're too young. You don't have enough experience in, to really know that this is the box you want to put yourself in for the rest of your life. And, to an extent, they were right. As bad as my dysphoria was, and I mean, I did things physically to my body that were, fortunately not as harmful as they could have been. But, as I, went through college and started an adult life, I migrated into a place where, I wasn't constantly ruminating on my gender and the dysphoria that I was feeling. I was actually doing things like taking college courses and working. And I eventually, because everyone was basically saying, you're probably just gay. And eventually I decided, well, maybe I'll try that out. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am. And I met the man who became my husband. And, that helped with the dysphoria for a long time until it didn't. But at least one of the things that I can say now is, the fact that I was attracted to men is not the reason why, I transitioned. Whereas it probably would have had a big part to play in that back when I was, a kid, because believe it or not, I didn't, I knew about transsexuals before I really knew about gays and lesbians. And one of the things that stopped me from really thinking, oh, well, yeah, I'm really just gay, is because the image of gay men that I was seeing was not like the men that I was attracted to. And so it took me as an adult to realize, oh, there's a wide variety of gay men out there. That, there are gay men that I find attractive. Yeah, I mean, even now that I've transitioned, I mean, it's kind of that old joke of, well, darn, you're on the wrong team now. Because, I'll see somebody, oh, yeah, back in the day, you probably would have gone for me. Now, not so much. But kids don't have that, that, ability to reason like that. And it surprised me when I started to realize, because in a way I thought, kids today have it so much better. It's so much easier to grow up and be gay and lesbian and be open and not have to, feel so much stigma about that. And then to realize how many people really still are struggling with that as part, and bleeding that into part of this whole gender identity thing. That really shocked me, because I just kind of thought we had gotten to a point where we were kind of past that. And it's, I'm sad that we are kind of mixing that all into gender now as well. It's just,
Well, and the lines they're drawing are becoming so extremely rigid. Like, if you're a boy and you like soft, plushy stuffed toys, then you're obviously a trans boy. So you're going to grow up to be a woman. You're going to grow up to be a trans woman, right? If you're a girl and you want to play baseball and play with Tonka trucks, then you're a trans boy and you're going to grow up to be a man, right? Like, the trans radical activists say that the binary is bad, and yet they're enforcing a very rigid binary onto children.
Yeah.
Well, like that mom, was she from Texas? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mom that was been interviewed, so she's, celebrating the fact that she has a trans daughter, but it was interviewed and fully admit that when she first saw signs of I don't know if we use the word effeminate or how to best say that, but that her male child was exhibiting signs of femininity and showed interest in feminine things, which they said, well, we don't want a gay son, and we're beating this kid for being what they thought was gay, until it sort of dawned on them, well, no, maybe we actually have a trans girl here, and now they celebrate that. I mean, is that right? There is that
Iranian.
It's very Iranian that I would rather just have a normal straight girl than a little gay effeminate boy.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's it strikes me, because I think most of us are probably around that same age, somewhere in their 40s and thereabouts. And I mean, I grew up in that time. My parents were, fortunately, they were not draconian about things, but they certainly saw the direction I was going in as a child. I certainly very clearly remember, I was coached on how I should talk at times and how I should walk at times, and how it's really inappropriate to giggle on the phone when I would talk on the phone or something like that, or how I carried my books. I didn't even realize that there was a specific way that men carried their books versus women carried their books in school, until I was basically told, well, you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. But I mean, they weren't monsters about it. It was, it was like, we are seeing things in you that are probably going to make your life harder, and we don't want your life to be harder. And I understand that, from a standpoint of, the 80s. It makes me very sad that, we are still 30 years later in that same place, except for now that we are literally telling people, this makes you the opposite sex. And it's like, or it makes you some variant of non-binary. It's like, well, what's wrong with being just feminine if you are male, and masculine if you are female, and I would have thought by this point we'd get to a point where really the people that decided to transition really do it for a comfort in their physical body, more so than this idea of fitting into a societal role, or this idea of masculine or feminine. Because I was kind of thinking that, we'd eventually get to a point where that stuff doesn't really matter. And I think for myself, I won't say I'm there completely, but I think that's where I've gotten to mentally is, look, if you want to call me he, call me he. I don't care. I'm probably not going to want to hang out with you socially because it's going to be kind of weird, but my world is not going to crumble. What's important to me at this point is I feel comfortable with the body that I have. I don't feel like there's much that I do that is different now at this point than prior to me transitioning. I still have the same type of job. I still act very much the same way. I mean, I wear different clothes kind of because it's expected, and they fit better at this point, but I miss pockets. But otherwise, people ask me like, well, what can you do now that you couldn't do as a man? And it's like, really nothing. I mean, honestly, it just, my body is what I feel comfortable with now. And so, call me what you want, that's not going to change how I, go through the world. Yeah.
I feel like we could chat with you for another hour at least. Janet, it's been great to have you on. Unfortunately, I'm short on time today, more so than usual. But we'd love to have you back if
sure
you're willing, so we can keep chatting with you and hearing your perspectives.
I've enjoyed it. And I always, I don't get enough opportunity to talk to trans men that often, so it is very nice to kind of have that back and forth and bounce things off of you guys, and because I think unfortunately, I think you guys get the short end a lot in this. You are kind of pushed to the background a lot, and like I said, unless you are brought up to kind of support trans women, it's that's not fair.
And we've had, like you're saying, you don't get the opportunity to talk to trans men very often. We don't get the opportunity to talk to trans women very often because, like you were saying in the beginning, very few want to talk about this stuff. So very much appreciate you talking about it with us.
I've had fun. It's been
Awesome.
nice putting some faces to names.
Likewise. And I think, a lot of people miss you on Twitter, so I think
Big time.
they'll really appreciate hearing from you too and knowing that you're doing okay. So hopefully your appeal, gets you back on there.
and I've got some video ideas that I'm working on. The next one I really want to do. I was going to do a kind of a response to your piece that got drug through the mud, but you've taken it down for revision, so I will wait until that's back up. But I also want to do a video kind of similar to this, what we talked about today, because I've read both Helen Joyce's book and Kathleen Stock's, and both of them really got hit with the transphobic label, and it's like there's nothing transphobic about those books. They're talking about the ideology, and so we've got to get this idea out of our heads that discussing the ideology is attacking trans people ourselves. We have to be able to separate it, but unfortunately I don't think most can, because it's gotten to the point where being trans itself is nothing but an ideal.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Be a good place to start a whole new conversation.
Yeah. So, well, guys, have a great afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You as well.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for talking to us.